This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Before I get into my guest today, I have a favor, a request. If you enjoy this podcast, let me know. 2 ways you can let me know. Go on to iTunes, write a review. It only takes a second. The second way, which makes the capitalist in me feel much better, go to Amazon. Pick up my newest edition of Trend Following, 225,000 words, hardcover. If you've not yet seen it, trust me, you're going to want this. This is not the same edition that I put out a long time ago. This is a new edition, beefed up, reworked, added to. You want this edition. Well, I don't really know if you want this edition, but remember, the point is to support the podcast. So in that context, you do want this new edition. My guest today, Alexander Elder, needs not much introduction for those that have seen, read, or purveyed trading books. Alex has written some of the most popular trading books of the last 30 years. If you've not yet seen his work, well, that's your problem, and perhaps you will fix that problem after listening to Alex today. This is my second conversation with Alex. He originally came on the show, I believe, 2012. I had to look it up while we were talking. Boy, time flies. So I'm so appreciative that he trusted in me to come on originally, and it's so much fun to have him back on now in 2018. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Alexander Elder. I'd be amiss, Alex, if I did not start with something that seems to be your passion right now, because literally the scheduling of our interview, this second call we're having today, has been held up by skiing. So a major passion of yours. And what I would love for you to explain, to talk about how long you've been skiing for sure. And we're going to go into trading, but talk about how long you've been skiing and what it is about it for you. Like, what does it really do for you at a root level?
You know, I began as a very young child. I began cross-country skiing. We had a lot of snow where I grew up in Estonia. Sometimes I had to ski to school, but it was very flat there. And I really didn't begin downhill skiing until I came to the United States when I was in my 20s. And soon after that, I started having children, and skis went out the window. And then when kids grew up, became teenagers, I started taking them skiing. My own skiing returned, and now I just love to ski. I live in Vermont. I live 12 minutes away from the ski lift. So after this interview, I'm going to get dressed and go. It's a beautiful sunny day, and ski season is still on. 2 weeks ago, I was skiing in Austria with several friends. What it does for me, it's a wonderful way to connect with nature. It's physical. It's challenging. It's sort of like trading, where you should become better, a little better every time, every week, every year. I got this app that measures the speed with which I ski and the distance I covered. I keep an eye on that thing, always trying to become better, but also just a wonderful way to be out, to breathe fresh air. I would say about a third of the time I ski alone, and 2/3 either with my friends or with my wife. So there's also a company feel to it. It's a great sport.
Has it become your meditation? And the reason I ask that is that in the last 4 or 5 years, I've really become quite addicted to yoga. And it's for the feeling that it gives me, the physical feeling after, I don't know if it's the cortisol changes, whatever, the stress reduction. Do you find something similar with skiing?
You know, not at all, because I find that when I ski, I have to completely concentrate on skiing and nothing else. I haven't taken any bad falls this season, because in the beginning of the season, I realized that every time I tumbled before, it was because the slope seemed easy or medium, and my thoughts went into something else. I drifted out. I have to be totally, absolutely 100.0% concentrated on the snow, on the position of my skis, and what's ahead of me. So it's not a zone out experience. It's a complete focus on what's on the current moment.
Let me clarify that, because I just took a yoga class last week and I told this teacher after, I said, what I really love about your class is that it's very physical. I said, I have to fixate, and really think about what you're asking us to do. And you hold these positions for a very long time. I'm just somewhat seeing a corollary here, or a correlation, because when you're in that moment and you have to only concentrate on skiing, there's a nice part of that where you get to turn your brain off, though.
Oh, absolutely, Michael, you're absolutely right. It's only the process. It's only the process. It's only this moment, and I can't think of anything else. I can't think of what's coming up later in the day. I can't think of what the euro dollar are doing. I can't think of anything like that. Now, here in the moment.
Now, as you've kind of rekindled it, is it something where you literally have to have it all the time, or I saw a great piece of research the other day from some scientific journal where literally stopping exercise increases the chance for depression.
I have my exercises for summer. I just bought myself a pedal board. It's like a surfboard, but it has a cut in the middle, and you drop pedals into it and go. I live between two lakes. I also have a tractor, and I love working on the property. I have two chainsaws, so I go around and I take down dead trees and I cut them up and hold them to the burn pile. Go to fire department, get a permit, fire up the whole thing. Summers in Vermont are very sweet. I was talking with my friends about going skiing in Norway in July or August. Apparently, they have the ski resort. I just learned about it, which is completely snowed in all year, and people only ski July and August. I love skiing, but there are many other good things as well.
I'm sure some people always want to get to the chase, and they don't know why I might ask someone like yourself about your passion. But to me, these things are all related. It's the 6 inches between the ears. Knowing how somebody kind of relaxes or how somebody gets through their passion, I think it's just so interesting. Here's my big picture question, though, the trading psychology type question to start with. And I'll probably even go back farther in your life for those that are not familiar with your backstory. But since you have become this best-selling author and this consultant and this person that people come to better understand themselves for trading success, what is the biggest change in the landscape that you've seen since perhaps your first book came out? You've had a chance 20 plus years to witness, the constant 24/7 on TV. Now it's become Twitter, it's Facebook, it's all this stuff. What's changed about human nature? Anything?
The human nature, I don't think, has changed very much. The one change worldwide, and I don't think it impacts trading all that much. I think the world has become much less violent in recent, let's say, in the last half century. We don't think about it because we hear all this horrible news all the time. But if you think about it, during World War I, there were days when 50,000 people would get killed in a single day, and it was sort of, that's how the cookie crumbles. You read about this military adventures now in Iraq and Afghanistan. 3,000 people die, and in the course of the entire war, and everybody is very concerned about it. So the value of human life, I think, has become higher. The level of violence in society is less, and actually, the scientific evidence for that. As they study human skulls for the last several hundred years, they find that skulls are becoming thinner. The chances of someone getting hit on the head with a heavy object is becoming less. And so the evolution propels us towards thinner skull bones. But that's the big picture. In trading, people always look for some kind of magic. How to make money working 15 minutes a week, no mathematics required. This kind of nonsense. It always existed, and the magic always changes. It used to be that if you have a calculator, you can calculate an exponential moving average instead of a simple one. Then we got computers. That was a total golden key to success. We had neural networks, we had Elliott wave, we had GAN. There's always some kind of magic on the horizon. Now, of course, it's algo trading. But in the end, all of that comes to human beings with their emotions. And one of the greatest fallacies of the economists is that they assume that humans are logical beings. To an extent we are, but not to a very large extent. I think we're driven by emotions very much, and that does not change a lot. That's not becoming any thinner like our skulls.
As you mentioned that, to take you back to the thoughts you had about valuing human life and less war, and you just mentioned humans having problems with logic. It's a great little example, though, to talk about war and violence, because it's entirely illogical to think with the population that's expanded and with the number of, look, all deaths are bad from war, but as you point out, the numbers have dropped it's nothing like World War I or World War II. But we still create these monsters in our mind that are very real for people. I mean, is it very real that some people wake up each day and really think they are at risk for terror, right? For example, for a terrorist assault or something like that. But from a logical standpoint, it's just not there.
I live in Vermont, and the form of government here is a town meeting. Once a year, the entire town is welcome to the local school auditorium, and we have a meeting. We discuss the budget. We discuss any topic. So 2 years ago, the local police chief wanted to push through to have a full-time policeman stationed at a local school, which would have cost us money. And there was a discussion of that. And I stood up at that discussion and I said, the risk of being hit by lightning in this country is much higher, substantially higher, than the risk of being hurt in a school shooting. So I suggest that before we start stationing a policeman school, we give each child a lightning rod. At least that will make them safer.
Making friends in Vermont with the folks that are scared, throwing some logic at them, huh, Alex?
Yeah. Well, the motion failed.
Let me take you back in time. For those folks that are not familiar with your story, you mentioned Estonia. And if I'm not mistaken, med school, age 16, I mean, that's a kid that's moving pretty quick. So I would love for you to describe for the audience some of your motivations, because I'm guessing you've not forgotten. A kid that gets into medical school at 16 remembers exactly what he was doing as a teenager, I'm guessing. So what was the drive that was pushing you at such a young age?
I didn't have any great interest in medicine, but I wanted to go to the university. I grew up in a very medical family. Everybody was a physician for a couple of generations before me. I needed to get into the university to avoid service in the Soviet army. So to the university I went.
Put a date on that for us.
60s.
Mid-60s, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember growing up, and we had blackouts all the time, because we were told that Americans were coming any day to bomb hell out of us, and so we had bomb drills and this and that and everything. Nasty times, completely repressed society, labor camps, Siberia. It was brutal. I hated the system. I grew up to hate the system. So I went to medical school, but really all I thought about was getting laid. That was my number one agenda.
Getting laid.
Getting laid, getting girls, right? I mean, that's all I could think about. And then also I got some education in the process. I mean, I graduated in the top 10% of my class.
Are you talking about that masculinity thing? I thought that masculinity thing was very toxic these days. I'm not supposed to talk
my mother taught me when I was very young how you open doors to ladies, how you always walk on the left and hold the lady under her elbow with your right hand, how manners, gentlemanliness. I mean, I grew up with that. I mean, I know that masculinity is something toxic these days. I hear about it, but I still operate in an old way. I mean, I have,
We could go off in that direction on quite a bit of time. And we did in our prior episode a little bit, I recall. You talk about growing up in that system, the Soviet system. How did you first start to have, because I'm going to bring it up a couple of years for those people not familiar with your story in a second, you're escaping, so to speak. What was driving your education? Like, how were you developing internally this desire that was obviously building to something else? Because you're in the middle of a very repressed system with a control of information. What were you doing? There was no internet. So what were you doing to get that insight into your brain beyond friends and family?
My grandfather, who was a big influence in my life, my mother's father, he was always listening to foreign radio broadcasts. And by the way, every Soviet city of any size was ringed by special antennas which suppressed the frequencies, shortwave frequencies, on which the Voice of America, Radio Liberty, BBC were broadcasting. I remember to this day, 16 meters, 25 meters, 49 meters. And my grandfather gave me this radio, which actually came from a German submarine, long story. And I would sit in front of that radio and twirl the dial, trying to see who, and there was this wow, wow, wow noise from the suppression towers. And I was trying to get those news from, can I get a little BBC today, or maybe Voice of America is coming through, depending on weather conditions. So I was listening to that. I also had a friend a much senior friend in the university, this man by the name of Garrick Superfin. When Alexander Solzhenitsyn was writing the Gulag Archipelago, Garrick was his archive researcher. And after Solzhenitsyn was exiled from the Soviet Union, Garrick was sent to prison for many years. And he was completely fearless. He would just speak his mind. And so I always sort of hanged around and listened. I mean, there was a sense that the system was completely false. The system was completely inhumane. The system was wrong. I got a sense of that. And, it's a funny thing is I realized fairly early on that I have this nose for quality. I know what's good. And it's not that I worked in it. I have it. It works in trading. It works in human relations. And it works also in politics. I really have a sense for that. And even if the good is suppressed, I can see it.
I love the way you say that, a sense, an intuition for quality. I like to think that I have that too. I'm a big believer when you start to have these debates about nurture and nature. And I've had Anders Ericsson on this show, who's done so much research in deliberate practice. But I don't know. Even if I look at family members and stuff, I don't know that sometimes they have the same eye. So it's an interesting way you just say that, that eye for quality. And you're not just talking materialistic, you're talking about people and philosophies, everything. Let me jump you up a little bit in time, because I find this fascinating. We've talked about it before. But, you get your medical degree, you're a doctor. In your early 20s, you make a break for it. Why don't you describe that? Because it's one of those things where, most people today are going to hear this story and they're going to be like, they don't have any frame of reference for how much intestinal fortitude it took to do that.
I grew up in the Soviet Union. The borders were absolutely locked. The borders were locked. There was a tremendous military force guarding borders. Example, I grew up in Estonia. I love swimming. And I got into snorkeling. Well, the law was, if you went swimming, you could, you need a mask, a snorkel, and fins, right? You were not allowed to have all three. You could have two, but not three. Why? Because Finland was 90 kilometers away. What if you swim to Finland? And that was the law. So if they caught you with all three, they would confiscate it and they would arrest you. I felt like an animal in the cage. I wanted to get out. So I got a job as a ship's doctor. And when the ship was in Africa, I jumped ship and I ran away. I literally ran.
Okay, hold on. What kind of ship are we talking that you jumped ship from exactly? Was it into the water, or were you guys docked, or what?
We were docked in Africa, in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. But the thing is that the Soviet Union was a completely isolated system, not only politically, but also economically. I was the fifth best paid person on the ship, and I was getting $10 a month, plus some Russian money. It was cheaper for the Soviet government to put a doctor on a ship, a merchant ship, which only had maybe 80-person crew. It was cheaper to put a doctor on a ship than to take somebody to a harbor doctor if somebody got sick. So I was working as a doctor on a ship, and we were allowed on shore leave, and in groups only, and the group was responsible for coming back together. And if somebody tried to escape, the group was told to do anything, including kill him, and don't worry, the Soviet government will get you out of it. I made sure, and of course, the group from which you run away gets punished. So I made sure I ran away from the group which was led by the secretary of the Communist Party for the ship. I did not run from any of my friends. I ran from the bad guy. I ran to the US, and before that, I would go to the upper deck every evening. Africa is hot, so when sun starts coming down, I would go to the upper deck and skip rope for a couple of hours. So when the running time came, I was not the strongest man on the ship, but I was certainly in the best shape of anyone. So I just took off and right, left, then I grabbed a taxi and went to the US Embassy. The rest is history.
Let me ask you, to the extent you know, How irregular would that have been in the 60s, early 70s when this took place? How irregular in escape? I mean, this wasn't really commonplace, was it?
Oh no, this was like things like that happened once every few years. Maybe they would have an escape like mine 2-3 times a decade. I mean, it was completely unusual. They did a pretty good job vetting who gets a job on a ship and who doesn't. It wasn't a simple thing. There is a book put out by the Hoover Institution in California called The KGB Wanted List. I'm in that book twice. They did not like me.
I love that, though. I mean, you at least today, I'm sure, look, you saw a lot of things in your life that I did not see, but I'm sure today you probably wear it a little bit as a badge of honor. Now with some time to look back on it, that you actually pulled that off. It's pretty damn cool, isn't it?
I wouldn't have done it today. Today I realized I was risking my life. It's so dangerous. As I get older, I value life a lot more. But back then I was living forever, and I took a wild chance, and it worked out very well for me. It was a kid stuff.
Let me press you, though. You say you took a wild chance, though, but it sure sounds like in your description, it's pretty calculated. The reason I'm even going down this path is because I think the way that you think is the useful takeaway from our conversation. When people finish listening to an hour with Alexander Elder, it's the takeaway of how you think. It's not like, okay, yes, Alex can tell you exactly, here are some trading strategies. Here is the trading psychology. But to me, it's like to get inside the mind of somebody who's making that decision. What's coursing through the veins, right? That's the cool stuff.
I mean, you have to be prepared. We're having this conversation fairly early in the morning before the market is open. Well, I've been up for the last hour, and what am I doing? My morning homework, studying, researching, planning, scheming, what I will do and what I will not do today. And that's what I did. That's what I did back then in Africa. I mean, running from that ship with my crewmates in hot pursuit. I mean, that's like putting on a trade. The trade is on. But the work was done way before that.
I think about it like, working on ourselves is the best way to work on anything, whether that's trading or entrepreneurship, starting a business, whatever. It's the interior work is where it starts. And when you talk about let's kind of move into the teaching of this, because I mean, we're giving the teaching by example, by your example right now, but you have to, and you've done this for decades now, to take people that perhaps don't have these experiences, these life or death experiences that you faced. They did not necessarily have that chance to get those adrenaline rushes and really kind of, have a wake-up call, so to speak. A lot of people today, I think it's a fair assessment to say, and you talked about the lack of violence, I think people have gotten a little soft. And I think sometimes maybe if they hear Alexander Elder talking, you might sound a little like, well, gosh, is it really, do I really have to work at it like that? Do I really have to focus like that? I mean, can't I just kind of dial it back some?
You have to work hard. And you have to be you have to find a place where you're emotionally stable, when you're emotionally not shaken by the market, where you are making decisions and not just jumping like a Pavlov's dog in response to the market ringing a bell. For example, just yesterday, the Dow opened down 500 points and challenged recent important lows, and then it ended up 200 points higher. This is precisely the kind of market where people who are not strong, people who are not skilled, people who are not prepared will sell at the bottom, and then, of course, they will wait for signals and more signals and more signals. Finally, all signals are good. Now they are buying. Well, by that time, I may be selling short already, because the best buy signals occur at the market top. That's where everything is perfect, and everybody knows that this is a bullish market. Well, what everybody knows is not worth knowing.
As you mentioned that down-up volatility on the Dow yesterday, speak to all of those millions of people across the planet that watched that. So there's people watching every minute of that. And it strikes me now as I continue to age, like all of us, but it strikes me that if one has a choice to trade, that widening your time horizon seems to have some resonance in terms of stress reduction, because it seems like the folks that are like all day long, glued to and they're glued to every piece of information possible. It seems like a really difficult quality of life in the long term.
I think it's also extremely counterproductive for trading. If someone is glued to the screen all day long, they inevitably can start following the market instead of looking at it from a distance, instead of looking at it in an objective way. Look, here is the concept that I keep repeating it to anybody who would listen. It took me a long time to comprehend that, so I figure I have to repeat it often for somebody else to comprehend it. Looking at the stock market, we all trade pretty much the same stocks year in and year out, a decade in and decade out. It's the same Ford, General Motors, then Tesla comes in, and Facebook comes in. But the point is, we trade pretty much the same basket of stocks. Now, some stocks get taken over, some stocks go out of business, some new stocks, some IPO occurs, but that's around the fringes. We trade the same things. So there are strong hands who buy low and then take profits high, and then there are weak hands who panic at the lows and get enough assurance to buy at the highs. And this constant seesaw goes in from strong hands into weak hands during rally. And then a decline begins, and now the weak hands start being shaken out. And at the bottom, the last weak hands just panic and wet their pants and sell their stocks. And that's where I buy. The best buying opportunities occur at the point of maximum danger. Now, it takes some technical knowledge to identify that maximum danger with some degree of precision. I don't claim to have 100% degree, but a reasonable degree to get the zone.
Well, there's no such thing as a 100% degree either, which is what you would say, I'm sure.
I know only one guy who always buys at the bottoms and sells at the absolute tops, and his name is a liar.
I want to keep you a point for a second that we just were talking about, the glued to the screens part. If you were to, in your mind, create a composite explanation from new traders, experienced traders, what is the drive to want to be glued? What is the advantage that people that don't yet have your perspective, why do they want to be glued? What do they think they're getting with the glued part?
I think there are two parts to that. It's a great question. I think there are two parts to that answer. First of all, I think it's kind of financial pornography. Just seeing how this thing moves up and down, it's like watching a porno video. It's very entertaining, especially for someone who is new to the system. It's extremely entertaining. She moved her leg this way. Wow, I've never seen that. The other part is that someone who is losing money and is becoming afraid and feels that he is just being buffeted by the market, he looks at it like a rabbit is looking at a snake. And the rabbit is just frozen looking at the snake. Look how that snake moves. Oh, maybe it doesn't see me. Oh, I think it's moving away. Oh, it's coming closer. It's partly entertainment, what I call financial pornography, and partly it's feeling weak, dependent, fearful, and keeping your eyes on the snake. But neither of those things does you any good. I mean, here I am before the opening. I make my trade plans, and I really like to hang around for the first 20, 30 minutes to see how the market opens. And then I'm going to go ski, and then I'm going to come back, have my orders in. Then I'm going to come back before the market closes, and I like to be around for the last hour before it closes, see if any changes, adjustments are needed. But I'll be glued to the slopes, not to the screen.
Thinking about those folks glued to the screen, it's really difficult, though, too, when you have something, for example, the reason, and I don't take anything away from him at all. I salute him. He's an entrepreneur. He's done well. But, Michael Bloomberg is a billionaire because he has given people one of those kind of porn screens of just data that never stops. Where I'm really trying to drive you at is to get people to understand that it's not all of the data. You got to make some choices, right? You can't, trying to take in all the data, I don't know how that fire hose approach works.
I sometimes compare trading to medicine. You cannot, now in the 21st century, you cannot know all of medicine. You cannot be an ophthalmologist, a dermatologist, a surgeon, and a psychiatrist, etc., etc. You simply cannot. There is too much. When you go into medicine, you've got to specialize. You choose a specialty. That is your specialty. That's where you aim to become very, very good. And then anything outside of your specialty, you just have to know enough to say, oh, that's not for me, and I have a good referral for you. That's who you go to. And the same thing in trading. Between fundamental news, between political news, between technical developments, between all this tremendous wealth of technical indicators, there is no way to master, no, never mind master, there is no way to learn everything there is to be learned about the markets. So you have to be humble. You have to say, I'm just a simple peasant. I'm going to find a sector of market knowledge, market expertise, and I will aim to become very good in my sector. And anything outside of that sector, I'm just going to raise my hands and say, not for me.
You know, I've seen you describe it as mind, method, and money. Why don't you apply some weights there for the audience? Like, you know, where do you weight things? I mean, from my perspective, I would say that the vast majority of market players that are first getting started really put like almost all of the weight on method. It's like the things that we're talking about today, the 6 inches between thy ears, is just like, oh, that's just Covel being philosophical. That's Elder just going off on a tangent. That stuff's not so important to me. Just tell me the indicator.
I can also show you a picture from a magazine with a computer. Well, back in the old days when there were disk drives, with $100 bills coming out of the disk drive. That was my favorite ad. If you get a computer properly tuned, unfortunately, every single computer that I bought had the direction of $100 bills reversed. I was feeding them into the computer as opposed to getting them out. Yeah, but that's what all the beginners do. If you can only select a proper parameters for stochastic, and by the way, what moving averages you use? Is it 22 days or 21 days? Which is better? If only, and listen, I went through that stage myself. It's tremendously attractive. It's intellectually challenging. And when I began to trade, I learned that's all I did, learning technical analysis. And then I realized, well, wait a second, what's wrong with this picture? I think I know technical analysis and I know it pretty well, but my equity goes up 40% and down 80%. What's wrong with this picture? Same technical analysis, huge equity swings. That was decades ago. The mind, the psychology. The third M, money management. A trader, a system that's making money for me, steadily making money for me year after year. And I would say that chances are very high that this trader will burn himself with the system. Why? Because he will get greedy, trade a size that's too large, and meanwhile there are very specific formulas how to control your trading size. Because if you start piling on risk, the quality of your trading is going to go down. And by the way, you mentioned mind, method, money. After several decades, they came up with the fourth M. How about that? Management, primarily self-management. And what I think is absolutely essential is keeping records. I sometimes say, show me a trader with good records, and I'll show you a good trader. Because by keeping high-quality records, not just writing down numbers, bought at 5, sold at 6, but keeping good quality records with charts, with explanations why you did this and did that, you insert a learning loop into your progress. You're not just chasing stocks or futures, but you're looking back at yourself. How did I buy? How did I sell? You become your own teacher. And so the self-management, record keeping, I believe is hugely important. We're having this interview in early April, and actually on my agenda for this week, I'm going to go through every single trade I closed in January. I'm going to pull up every closed trade. I'm going to pull up a current chart of where that stock or commodity stands today. And I'm going to draw a new chart with all the markings. And so the trade that I did is not going to be at the right edge. By now it's in the middle of the chart. And so I will see what I did right, what I did wrong. And this is how I learn from my own experience. And this is what I recommend. But hey, who's got the time? Let's go forward. Let's adjust stochastic.
Hey, let me keep you back at a moment where you were talking about the the difference in variable, for example, it could be, we could be talking anything, but 21 and 22. And I had some questions the other day from somebody, and they were asking about ATR length, and they were asking about using an exponential or a simple moving average for the ATR. I'm always struck, and I want to hear your explanation for people to get them to think about the concept of robustness. But I'm always struck that smart people, when they first start to think about, let's say, technical analysis or trend following or systems trading, and they start to get this idea in their head of, okay, an indicator says to do this at level this, that they get so precise that it can only happen at that one variable. Now, of course, their application should be consistent, but the idea that they think it breaks and falls apart if it's not at that one precise point, I'm still a little surprised after all these years that's such a blind spot for a lot of people.
I absolutely agree with you. And actually, you used the term that I was going to say, robustness. Good systems are robust. Good methods are robust. Whether your moving average is 10, 11, 12, 13, it should give pretty much the same results. And if 11 works and 12 doesn't, well, you're using a wrong method. Toss it out the window, look for a new one. Good approaches are robust, and they allow for some, it's like driving a car. You can drive a Mercedes-Benz, or you can drive some 15-year-old Buick, or you can get behind the wheel of a Ferrari. As long as you know how to drive, you will drive them all about the same good. Why? Because of your personal skill. And this idea that if you only create a perfect system, the market will open up and start raining money on you. It's a delusion. It comes from weakness. It comes from thinking that you're not strong enough. Not you, but the client is not strong enough to make decisions. Well, I'm going to build a system that will make decisions for me. If this thing really worked, if this approach really worked, then the guy with the biggest computer would have owned the exchange by now. And it hasn't happened, because ultimately it's the human being who makes the decision.
Take me back in time. I want to know, as you lay out this wisdom on our show so far, what was the pivotal moment early in your career? I don't know if you've already been introduced to the trading bug by now, but what was the pivotal moment, the mentor, the book, the writing? What was the thing that broke you off in the direction to where you've become the guy you are today with your perspective, on the trading perspective?
Michael, I don't think there was a moment, there was a book, there was a mentor. It came slowly and through a lot of painful experiences and losing money, and sort of a combination of being stubborn. I was not going to give up. I hated to lose. And so I was going forward and making all these mistakes and losing. And eventually I figured out how to change myself. I wish it was a fast process. There was a guy in Chicago, he's been dead for quite a few years now. His name was Brian Monison, who said in an interview that high level of education is an obstacle to success in trading. He said, I have a PhD in mathematics. I specialized in cybernetics, but I was able to overcome these disadvantages and make money. I had those disadvantages. It took me an embarrassingly long time to overcome them. But overcome them I did just out of sheer cussedness, out of stubbornness.
Why do you say embarrassing?
Took a very long time. I wish it was, if I had a teacher like myself back in those days, I would have done it so much faster. I did not have to spend so much time. I was discovering, I was reinventing the bicycle, and today I can show somebody how that bicycle is constructed, and they can ride it as long as they are prepared to put a little bit of time into practice.
You just mentioned, you said you hate to lose, you're stubborn, but that's kind of like an aspirational drive, big picture drive. But when it comes to your trading, for example, if your stop has been hit, you're not about hating to lose, and you're not about being stubborn. You're taking that stop. Speak to, though, the big picture of you and this stubbornness and this hate to lose. And I'm not talking about trading right now. I'm talking more about you and how somebody can perhaps get inside your mind to see why that was ringing in there. Like, when did this hate to lose thing start? I assume when you were a kid.
I don't think so. I think it came a bit later. I think a turning point for me came, strangely enough, about a year after I came to the United States. I got a job as a research assistant at this medical center, psychiatric research center. They gave me, it was in the suburbs of New York, and they gave me a room in a dorm. I had a black and white TV. I had a car, a luxury. So I thought I was on top of the world. And then I came down with a cold, a nasty cold. And so I was laid up in my room for a few days. Nothing special. I just knew it was a simple cold. And my boss's secretary was coming over every day and bringing me chicken soup. Nice old fat woman who really liked me and sort of treated me very well. So, but I'm lying in bed. I can't really concentrate on any reading or anything. And so I did a lot of time thinking. And it suddenly occurred to me. I realized that back in the old country, I grew up in this successful family. And if I turned out to be a total bum, they would be chewing my ear off and they would be harassing me and this and that. But I would still have a roof over my head and 3 squares a day, all my life. And here I was in America. I didn't have a single relative here. I didn't have any support system. And I realized that if I do not function, there is nothing between me and the abyss. I can go down as low as possible. I realized it was all completely up to me. There was nobody to support me. And that was a very, very useful discovery.
Is there any color that you might like to share from that period that maybe you've not shared before about things that you had to do to survive, that you had to get ahead? I mean, even if it was something simple or basic or a type of job or something. I mean, because I think so many times today, the typical script in America, for example, is a young person grows up in the suburbs and, they go to college and they've got a big debt and they go party on and, drink a lot and this and that. And there's not a lot of risk really. It's just kind of a big country club type thing. So I would love for you to contrast, as you're sitting there thinking, my gosh, I could have stayed with the family. I could have had 3 squares a day. What did you have to go through at that moment in time?
I never thought I could stay with the family. I had enough of that family. I wanted to get away from the family. So I never thought. I think the decision to jump ship was the single best decision in my life.
Literally, you're talking about the literally jumping ship.
Well, figuratively, because I was on a shore leave with a group in Africa.
Right.
Yeah, so that was the best decision, and it was planned and it was executed.
But that time when you were in that dorm area, like what was and how long was this process going on? Because this is something most people are not really having to do today, this kind of struggle.
It was a few days. It was a few days when I was running a fever. I could not really concentrate on studying or reading or doing anything, and I was like lying in bed and thinking about where I was and where I would be. And I realized that if I do not function, if I do not do things for myself, there is absolutely nobody who will do things for me. And if I decide to take it easy, I can go down as deep as possible, and nobody will stop me. There was a great realization that it was me. It's up or down, basically. Years later I had a friend who said to me in those days, Alex, one of these days you're going to be successful, you're going to be making $50,000 a year. And I said to him, well, what can you do with $50,000? Who needs so much money? But in any case, years later, I was practicing psychiatry, and I realized that some of my alcoholic patients, and I never had problems with alcohol. I would have a drink. To this day, I like a glass of wine, but never had a problem. But I realized that some of my alcoholic patients had the same thing. When their drinking got them to the point where they were at hitting rock bottom. Do I become a bum or do I turn my life around? And that's actually one of the themes in my first book that I wrote, Trading for a Living. It has a chapter, Lessons from AA, Lessons from Alcoholics Anonymous. You hit a rock bottom, you take a bunch of stupid trades, you take a bunch of impulsive trades, you destroy your account, and now you decide, you walk away from it forever, or you push away from rock bottom and start paddling up. I paddled up.
As you describe that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, bum or turn thy life around. This is always a personal choice, isn't it? It's always a personal choice. There's not, I'm thinking you just mentioned some alcoholic patients. Ultimately, those alcoholic patients, they could get all the treatment in the world, but it's going to be up to them if they want to stop. I think that's something that sometimes, at least from my perspective, not putting words in your mouth, from my perspective, it seems like we always think there's someone there that can fix it for us. But the reality is when you're in the middle of whatever that addiction might be, it's you, right?
You know how many psychiatrists it takes to change a light bulb? Only one. But the light bulb has got to want to change.
That's so tough for people to hear. What you just said there, you and I could break that apart. You could teach that sentence you could teach for weeks and weeks, months, semesters. But so many people don't want to accept it.
You know, I can teach it for months and weeks, or I can say to the guy, the single best step for you to improve your trading at this point today is to start keeping good records. Let me show you the format in which I keep my records. Feel free to change it, adapt it to your needs, but I'm giving you my format for keeping records. And I would like it to, let's say, for the next month, record every trade like that. After that, I'm going to teach you the next thing. I doubt that 1 person out of 10 will do that.
Even if they have a terrible system, you're just saying, hey, write it all down and let's see what you got.
Yeah. I have a friend, a former student, now a friend in Michigan, and she is a very successful option writer. And she is very kind of outgoing lady, so everybody knows what she is doing. And so she says people constantly come to her and say, and she says, oh, it's so easy. She says, I told my granddaughter, you're an artist, you look at patterns, I can teach you to write options. So people come to her and say, well, teach me. And she says, sure, I want you to keep records of option prices for this stock, of all option prices for the next month. Come back with a handwritten record, we'll take it from there. And she says that blows them all off. Nobody came back. To keep records by hand for a month ain't gonna happen. You have to have this toughness. You have to have this thing that I will work. I will change myself. And if somebody can do that, I can teach them. If they don't have that, well,
that was the perfect like ending. Well, and then there's the death silence. So basically what Alex just said is that when that pause for 5 seconds, you just died in your trading world or something.
And most people, it's wonderful for people to lose money trading because when I trade, where my profits are going to come from? They're going to come from people who are impulsive, undisciplined, and ignorant. Right? I'm not going to get any profits out of you. I'm going to get profits out of somebody who stumbles into the market and doesn't know anything about risk management, knows a few things about stochastic and moving average, and now he is out to beat me at the trading game. We need people like that. We need people like that to support the markets.
I can't keep you because I know you want to get on the slopes, but you just said something that struck me where you passed judgment. You passed judgment. You talked about people that were impulsive and ignorant. Now, you didn't say it in a cocky way. You didn't say it that you're all that. But I was thinking about one of my very first questions in this conversation, what's changed? I think I might argue that one of the things that's changed is that for that person, Alexander Elder, when he says, hey, you are acting impulsively, that is ignorant. That is become something in society today for that person, you, that has that experience to offer that view. I think more people feel their egos are bruised today than perhaps past years to hear that kind of stark advice.
Back when I was busy practicing psychiatry, a fairly typical sort of beginning of a case, a patient comes in. We sit in the armchairs opposite each other, and the patient says, the boss is an animal, the wife doesn't care, the kids talk to him only when they need money, and life is generally miserable. And I sit there listening, taking it all in, occasionally asking a little question, and the patient kind of slightly begins to relax. The patient, for the first time in a long time, somebody is listening to him. So we make the next appointment. He's coming for the second session, and there's initial evaluation, usually 2 sessions. He comes to the second session, and by now he feels more comfortable with me. He knows that somebody is listening, paying attention, serious. So he tells me more about the animal of a boss and the wife who doesn't care, And then there is a pause. And I say, a man walks down the street and a dog bites him. Oh, the patient now is nodding to me in compassion. He knows exactly what I mean and how it feels. The question I have, I say, There were 50 other men on the street. What signal did he give to the dog that he was okay to bite? And now the hook is in. Now we can talk.
I like that. That's why you have done in your career what you've done, to pass along that great piece of insight to cause everybody to pause and go, I start to understand what it might be like just a little bit to be a psychiatrist. Hey, where can we send people, Alex? I know you're going to hit the slopes, but I want to send people to the website. Obviously, the classic book they should check out, Trading for a Living. There's new editions. There's other books. There's a ton of stuff. Go to Amazon. Where's the website where we can send people?
Michael, first of all, correction. There is a book, The New Trading for a Living. It was updated. The original book got updated 22 years later. So The New Trading for a Living is the latest. And I consider it my most important book. When the publisher finally prevailed on me to create that book, I budgeted 3 months of work for an update. Well, it took 18 months, and I almost completely rewrote the book. So it's The New Trading for a Living. And my website is very simple, eldred.com, my last name.com. I got into the internet when short names were still available.
Hey, I have Covel.com. So I think that's the same number, letters. Yeah, there we go. Alex, go have fun on the slopes.
Thank you very much.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.